First, let me introduce the team. We have, besides myself, we have Dr. Corinne Langsfeld. She is a bioengineering professor at our school. And of course, the most important person is Ian Welch. Ian is the one that started as an undergraduate project and then turned it into a master's degree, and now he's the one that's responsible for commercialization of the idea. The whole concept started by our, what we call it, before breakfast meetings and discussions that we had at Health Sciences, Dr. Jeff Wallace and Dr. Robert Schwartz, and then a number of activities that I have had with Dr. Steve Albert at the VA Medical Center for almost 10 years now. So it's one of those that really the scientific concept has been done for a number of years, and in fact we had initial support from National Science Foundation and Department of Health and Human Services. And then came along the Bioscience grant, and they said if you have something that's close to move it to commercialization, this is the objective, and so this is one of those. In terms of what it is that we are trying to do is basically, this is the prototype, and I'm going to pass it around. It's creating an intelligent insole that goes inside the shoe. What does it do? It's because it's a device to try to prevent elderly from falling. And I can give you statistics of about 14 million falls-related injuries are per year in elderly. In terms of the cost of these falls, in terms of the fact that many of them end up basically with the patients dying within 5 years of it. They go through the hip replacement and so forth. In terms of the number of amputations that takes place because of the diabetics, because this is not only preventing fall, it's an insole that prevents development of ulceration that leads into neuropathy. So there are two technologies basically embedded within the same insole. Now, the idea is, of course, if we can prevent development of ulcers in people with diabetes, and if we can prevent elderly from falling, then we would be able to have a major impact in terms of both of these candidates. So the solution that we have, and as I said, the technology and the science behind it takes a few more hours to go through, but all I'm going to talk about is what is inside that insole. It's basically, you are looking at the foot pressure distributions that we are measuring by these thin film sensors, and we are also having accelerometers. These are MEMS-based, that's microelectromechanical based accelerometers that are embedded in the insole. We are also measuring foot temperature at certain, in fact, to be exact, 5 strategic locations, and those were part of the research that was done earlier on to identify where those locations are. And then what we have is added wireless communications with a very low power radios, and then the compact design that you see, and I'm going to show you a few variations before it has ended up with this final version. It's now driven by a battery, but this battery, as part of the next phase of research we are doing, is going to be replaced by the energy that the individuals we can extract from their walking, so it will be powered by the kinetic energy of the walk itself. And then it has the data storage that you can retrieve it, or it could be wirelessly transformed into either a daycare or a care center or a doctor and so forth. This was the first prototype of the system, and of course you can see we had to dig into the shoe, and the antenna, of course, was something sticking out and looking at. It was dependent on the external power source and so forth, but it was one of those that I never forget the meeting we had with Dr. Schwartz, that we had him put on the shoe and walk around, because we thought that he's going to say, boy, the patients are not going to like this. But he walked around and said, no, this is so good, this is so good. And he was walking, and then we had the screen, he was looking at the impact of his gait on the screen simultaneously. The next version was to move into the direction of what you see right now, but there's still, we had requirement of digging into the heel of the shoe in order to embed part of the electronics and the power source. And the final version is what you see now. This is the prototype, that it's a self-contained system, and you can put it in any shoes. And what happens is that there will be a small box that will sit within the vicinity of the individual. So as they are walking, all of that information is transferred into that box, and it's that box that performs the analysis and so forth. And what it is that the analysis it does is that as the individual walks, it monitors the gaits and in real time calculates whether or not they are reaching the verge of moving out of the stable zone. And if they do, then it gives them an alarm. And the alarm could be in terms of visual, could be in terms of acoustics, or a vibration like a pager that you have. And the beauty of this is that as long as it's giving them what we call it a green signal, that means you don't need to worry about, because that's one of the worries of the elderly, that especially if they have fallen before, they are afraid that they're going to fall. And so it stops their mobility. The same thing goes with the people with diabetes, that if they have developed ulceration and maybe even to neuropathy, they are afraid of walking. This gives them the confidence that they can continue as long as they are not being alarmed by the insole itself. So this is more in terms of the electronics that's embedded inside that insole, and you can see in terms of the size and the thickness and so forth. There are a number of differences. There are some things that are out there, but it's usually used inside the physician's office. They are very expensive, and this is really, we believe it's revolutionizing that whole area of gait monitoring. And there are a number of other applications that we are looking at. We are in the midst of, we have done some human subject studies, got the results, and we are in the midst of doing a major subjects that we believe should be conducted and completed over the summer. And in terms of commercialization, as you can see, initially we started with the idea of elderly and people with diabetes. But we have now been approached by manufacturers of what I call athletic wears. This is Nikes and so forth, that they believe this is going to be used, and I can understand, for sports, maybe more than even the elderly. Because you can use this insole, just to give you some ideas. And if you are a golfer, you can do your golf swing, and you can compare the signature of that with the signature of if you were really a good golfer. Same thing with the SPs, same thing. We believe that we can approach Shaquille O'Neal and finally help him to make his 3-pointers or the penalty shots. So we believe that there's a huge market from the athletic side, even though initially our goal, and it still is our goal, to help with the elderly. So with that, in terms of where we are, we have some partners that they have showed a good deal of interest in terms of doing high volume manufacturing, low cost manufacturing. In fact, these folks have manufacturing facilities in China, and they like to be a partner. And They already have programs with Kaiser, so in terms of introducing it to Kaiser would be a very easy approach. But there are other ones that we are talking to. In terms of our timetable, as I said, the goal is to finish all of our human subjects by the end of the summer, finalize the production version based on what we learn over the summer, and then ready for sales and marketing in January. With that, be happy to answer any questions. And it is 6 o'clock. Yes, please.
So how much does it cost?
Right now, if in terms of onesies and twosies, we have 16 prototypes that we have. You are talking about a few hundred, but if we go to the high volume manufacturing, it's less than 100. So it's cheap compared to basically, and there is no alternative, but anything close to it.
So the alarm that is set off, how is?
The alarms are going to be, as I said, either it will be in terms of a pager, or the other version that we are in the process of design stages, that those that wear glasses, then it would have 3 LEDs, red, yellow, greens on the glass, and then they would know.
And can you set the default so that people would get more or less warning of falling? And the reason I'm thinking about this is, there's many neuropathological conditions, for example, where people just repeatedly fall.
Yes.
And if they had enough warning, they're still.
That would be. Some of these will come out of these groups that we're gonna have them go through over the summer. The other part that I forgot to mention is this is gonna be the best technique, in our opinion, of course it's our opinion, to look at the impact of drugs. So especially when the elderly are taking combination of the drugs, if the drugs actually impacts their gaze, that could lead into falls. And you can monitor all of that. There's another version that we are just about to enter, is that when you, and some of the MDs, they probably know this, but when you are doing your heel, and since we already have accelerometers, we could measure how much rotations you may make. And there are studies that have shown those that have, or they are in the process of developing Alzheimer's, you can detect it from there. And then there are a number of brain-related disease that some studies shows that if you actually monitor the gait, you can detect it.
And there are some of those neurological diseases where you always fall one way.
Yes, that is true.
You fall backwards, so you fall forwards. So presumably you could build that into this.
How quickly do you have to have a feedback mechanism to actually prevent, to have an impact on falling?
The real answer, I don't know. But what it is, at least based on our preliminary, it is the pattern that gets developed. So it's not like an instant change in the gait. It will be so it will give you enough time to see if you are approaching that, what we call it, the pattern of instability. As part of the human subject testing, and that's why Jeff Wallace is really instrumental. As you know, he's in charge of the care facility that's in Fitzsimmons. And so the idea is that we're going to have a number of those individuals wear this, and as they go between their room and the kitchen, we will be monitoring them throughout and then seeing if there are changes in the patterns. So some of the patterns are still premature in terms of how fast they change.
How do you factor in wear and tear in the design? It seemed like it'd just be tremendous.
Yeah, no, that's another great question. And there are other factors such as the type of socks that they may wear, and the summer-winter cases, especially in the case of temperature for diabetes. And what we have done is that some of these indicators can be used, meaning like one of the temperature sensors will be used. We have identified which one as a reference. So instead of looking at absolute values, you look at the differentials with that reference point, and you will be able to detect that. So it's using that combination that you will be less sensitive to wear and tear. But you are right, eventually it will. And at this point, we have no idea what is the life of these things until we go through maybe a few years of it. But by making them so cheap, there still would be a great alternative that maybe every year they may want to get a new pair. But they are very durable. These MEM technology, that's the beauty of the MEM technology. It's very durable.
How do you pick a patient population that's going to be ideal for your study?
For the studies,
where you're most likely to have
sure.
an impact on
Ian, do you want to talk about this type of groups, or you want to?
So actually how it works is you can't just generalize everyone in one group because everyone has a different walking pattern. So it's to be on a per patient basis. So we're going to create, have them do some normal activities, create a baseline, and then all our calculations will be based off that initial baseline. So as their gait pattern deviates, it'll change. So initially what we've done thus far is used our biggest resource, the student population. And so what we've done is we've had healthy adults, ages around 20, walk, and we've had them walk normally, and then we've actually forced changes on their gait to detect those patterns of change that are coincide with the elderly and what they actually subconsciously do to prevent themselves from falling. So then from there, we're going to move into actually an elderly population is our next phase, and actually have them wear this for a period of time, up to a month, and see what actually happens over in a normal case. So that's our plan.
We have a number of volunteers that have come forward, elderly especially. Some of them, the ones that have fallen, and they really are looking for a means of preventing further falls.
Do you have to set the shoes per person, you said, individual?
Only for the size, in terms of, but what we eventually, and that's what we are hoping that we will have by the end of the summer, is that within the memory of the insole, you're going to have classes, and then depending on the individual, before you give the insole, you identify which class it should be using as a pattern recognition.